Hi folks, my name's Andy, welcome to Really Random Reads. Today, a video that I was a little bit nervous about doing. Why was that? Because when I made this channel, I made a very conscious decision to try to keep it positive in terms of approaches to books, talking about books and just tone generally. Don't know if I've always managed to achieve that, but that's my goal. Now, why is that? It's because I think if you approach things that way, you tend to get more out of your pursuits. That does not mean, though, being, here's a word, right? So some years ago, I was on a training session to do with drugs because I was working in addiction at the time. And the trainer, really down to earth bloke from Scotland, from Glasgow, working class guy, sort of very down to earth. He was talking about, he went, who knows what the word Panglossian means? And I had actually not long read Candide by Voltaire, and there's a character in that called Pangloss. And he walks around for the entire novel, it's a satire, he walks around, when all this terrible stuff happens, he walks around saying, it's for the best, in the best of all possible worlds. So something horrific will happen to him, which he should feel upset about, but he goes, it's for the best, in the best of all possible worlds. And that the humour comes from that. But anyway, bringing it back to drugs, what he was saying, what the trainer was saying was, don't, when you're working with people, if something really bad has happened, if their life at that point in time really is shit, don't be sort of like, oh, let's look for the silver lining. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times when looking for a silver lining can be the right approach to take. But he was saying, like, don't be a naive, kind of, don't be a Panglossian. Bang that word into Google, Panglossian definition. Yeah, I didn't put my hand up at that time, so I just felt far too embarrassed to kind of say, oh, I think I know what it means. But I think of that lesson from him a lot. So anyway, in terms of this channel, if I come across a book that I feel just has absolutely no redeeming features, or a book where there are good parts in it, but there are things that I found to be negative too, I won't shy away from talking about them. But I didn't want to create one of these kind of like ranty, moany channels that I know are out there, but I can't even really think of an example because I kind of avoid watching them. So yeah, that was why I felt a little bit nervous making this video, because I didn't want to fall into the trap of that. But this is not a video about bad books. It's not a video about books that I think are badly written or are bad or anything like that. It's a video partly about books that just haven't worked for me. So I did another video recently called Is It the Book or Is It You? And in that, I talk about books that haven't worked for me and my hunch a lot of the time that it has been because of me, either the way that I have approached them or for some other reason. So I'm going to talk about 3 books today, and I'm not saying, I want to get that really clear, I'm not saying these are bad books. I am saying that these are books that when I read them, I felt bored. And I could dress that up and try and say it in different ways, but I'd be mental gymnastics. Rightly or wrongly, when I read them, I felt bored. I do not want to indoctrinate myself and make myself like something. At the same time, with at least 2 of these books, there are people out there whose opinions I very much respect that got a lot from them. And I would welcome being able to see, I'm almost tempted to say, what I'm missing, because I think there is something that I'm missing, at least in 2 of the cases. First book I want to talk about, I imagine this is the one that will elicit the strongest what's he on about response. It's Persuasion by Jane Austen. So I really like the novel The French Lieutenant's Woman by John Fowles. John Fowles was a very, very, very flawed character as a human being. However, I am fascinated by his writing. And he sets that novel down in Lyme Regis. And the thing that I always forget the name of that goes out into the sea, I'm going to put it on the screen. Last time I talked about the cob. I forgot the name last time I put it on the screen, remembered this time. The cob in Lyme Regis that goes out to the sea. He very consciously writes that into the French Lieutenant's Woman, and it became iconic. Film was made with Meryl Streep and Jeremy Irons. The Black Widow's insurance company in real life, like, used it for their advert with a woman dressed in black. John Fowles did that partly, well, not partly, massively, as a big nod to the cob when it's talked about in Persuasion. John Fowles, keep calling him Fowles, John Fowles really admired Jane Austen. That's well documented. Didn't do many interviews, didn't like doing interviews, but we know that. So there's somebody whose opinion I respect, and I know he thought a lot of Jane Austen, and in particular he thought a lot of this book. Katie at Books and Things thinks a tremendous amount of this book. I respect her opinion very highly. I went to Bath a few years ago, which is where Jane Austen lived, with my partner. We went to the Jane Austen Museum, and I bought this edition of Persuasion from there. I really like these. Oh look, I've even got the thing in it. I've even got, sorry, thrown off track there, Penguin sort of deluxe editions, even though we all know the covers are a buff, I really like them. So I'm in the bookshop, I go and buy that, I go up to the counter, the person who sells me the book on the counter, I think I'm right in saying Katie used to work at that museum too. Maybe she sold books to people, but I bought this book from that person, and she's like, I'm so glad you've picked that one. That is my favourite of the Jane Austen novels. So I went into this really, really, really wanting to like it. What's it about? It's about a female protagonist. I think I'm right in saying the consensus is, of all the protagonists that Jane Austen wrote, this one is meant to be sort of closest to her. So this character has the opportunity to get married and is persuaded not to marry somebody, and then they come back into the story later on, and it's really, that's the conflict. Where do things go from there? I really struggled with this book. It's not long. It's 230 something pages. And I remember saying to my partner, I was reading this in the Airbnb, I was like, she's like, oh, how are you getting on with it? And I'm like, just nothing is happening. I'm just waiting for something to happen. And I was telling her about different people I knew or knew of who kind of respected this book, and how I was hoping to get so much out of it, and about John Fowles and the enthusiasm of the person who sold it to me in the bookshop. And it was a disappointment that it wasn't working and that I felt bored. I'm going to use that word and be honest about it. But B, this feeling of also, what am I not getting? I'm missing something here. Like, I respect the views of the people who get a lot out of this book. I think this is me. What am I missing? I've not read all of Jane Austen's other books, but I really, really like Pride and Prejudice. Well up for rereading that. Was a complete page turner for me. Massively sucked into it. I also enjoy what are sometimes loosely termed quieter books. But I felt bored. Not quiet books to the point of like where I feel nothing is happening. So yeah, I want to sit down sometime and have a drink or a coffee with somebody who knows about this book and just have a chat about what am I missing. First one up, Persuasion. Second one up, Naked Lunch by William Burroughs. Discovered William Burroughs getting on for 20 years ago, and I read Junkie and Queer, and they are fiction books by William Burroughs. They're quite short, they're novellas really, and linear narratives, all very straightforward in terms of story. And at that time, they meant a lot to me, sort of personal reasons, but also straightforward narrative. Like I really engaged with those books and took a lot from them, and be curious to read them now actually and see what I make of them after that passage of time. And I knew that Naked Lunch was meant to be the book of William Burroughs. This was meant to be like his crowning masterpiece. And, you know, sex and drugs and all these things were meant to be in it, and topics that probably a bit naively at the time, I thought it would be hard to make them boring. And yet, God, did I struggle with this book. So where are we at? How many pages? 289 pages this edition. I wasn't keeping like a reading diary or anything back then, but I remember it took me a hell of a long time to read. The bookmark was not moving very fast through this book. Famously, it was written using the cut-up technique that I might not describe entirely accurately, so go and have a look it up if you're interested. But it was where William Burroughs cut pieces out of numerous pieces of text, like newspapers and such, and then arranged them together to make a story. At the time, I was highly skeptical of that and thought, sounds like bollocks. But I don't know. I'd need to revisit it, I think, to sort of shoot it down. Is it the book or is it me? These days, this book, I feel fairly confident in saying, is not held with the same reverence that it was even 20 years ago. And William S. Burroughs, who was in life, you know, you have people like famous singer folks, famous punk rock icon. I have a massive poster over in the back room. Patti Smith. You have people like Patti Smith, who had a friendly relationship with William Burroughs. Patti Smith, I mean, what do I know about Patti Smith? What do you ever know about somebody from listening to the music and reading their books? But she seems like a fairly decent person. So what am I trying to say? There are things about William Burroughs' life where he seems like an unpleasant human being. There are also other people who appear to have had very treasured friendships with him, people who seem quite nice. Well, let me get back to this book a little bit, okay? So it's difficult to give you like a plot or what it's about, not least because I haven't read it in 20 years, but also by the nature of the book. So the cut-up technique, the fact that it's surrealist, disclaimer, I struggle with surrealist fiction. As a genre, that's probably not something that's massively for me. That said, really like Twin Peaks by David Lynch and rewatched it recently. But I also know that it's kind of going against the grain a little bit for me as a reader or a viewer when I watch surrealist fiction. As a writer or a filmmaker, you're having to work to engage me in a way that if you spoke to one of my friends who's well into that type of stuff, you're kind of pushing against an open door. So it's got the surrealist thing going on. And the plot, I'm going to look down for this, did a quick Google because I just can't remember the plot from 20 years ago. Bits of it come back to me, others largely don't. But it's a surreal, non-linear novel that follows William Lee, who, I remember this is a thinly masked version of William Burroughs, a drug addict, so somebody who has issues with drugs, and fugitive. And as he navigates an hallucinatory landscape filled with grotesque figures, government agents, do you remember that? Sort of a bit Kafkaesque, and bizarre sexual and medical experiments. So that was one that didn't work for me. One I would be up for kind of like dipping, I'd like to dip back into this. I don't know if I'd sit down and do a beginning to end read. Maybe sit down and read the first 50 pages and see if it holds me. Yeah, I'm interested to hear from you. And if you like this book, if you got things from it, it's not an attack on you. I'm genuinely curious to learn about what it was you got from it and to help me see it too. Finally, the books of Jacob, spelled the books of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk. And where do I even begin with this one? Okay, so I've done a few videos about Olga Tokarczuk. She won a Nobel Prize. She's written novels such as Flights, Drive Your Plough Over the Bones of the Dead, and Impusium, subtitle A Horror Story. This, many people think, is her magnum opus and crowning glory. She's a Polish writer, okay? And my partner's parents are Polish. My partner's mum is a translator and reads lots of books. And she very much likes Olga Tokarczuk, because Olga Tokarczuk is, for many people who are Polish, this is my understanding, you know what I'm saying this, I'm not Polish, but my understanding is a celebrated writer from their country. For other people who are Polish, there are a number of people who don't like her because they perceive her as having attacked religion and run their country down. That's my very unnuanced understanding of their position. But my partner's mum likes her very much, likes her writing, but she told me this book was boring. So it was on her shelf in Polish. And I said, tell me about that sort of thing. And she gave me her very unfiltered opinion on that book, which she had read in Polish. And many people would say, you know, on these channels where we talk about books, this phrase DNF, do not finish. They would say, if you're not getting something from a book after 50, 80 pages, perhaps just leave it. Life's only so long, there's other books to read. I think it's fair to say my partner's mum was having that experience, but just ploughed on anyway and finished it. I wanted to read this because I'd read Drive Your Plough. I think that's the only one I'd read, actually, at that point. And they got, ironic, isn't it? She said, like, how boring it was and not to read. Like, it's dry. She used that word as well, dry. But they got me it as a present. so I read this. What's it about? I'm going to turn to a quick summary that I've got off the internet here for you, okay? Because it's going to do a better job than I would. So it's a sweeping historical novel, I would agree. It's massive in scope. That chronicles the life and rise of Jacob Frank, an 18th century Polish Jewish religious leader claiming to be the Messiah. And I knew that premise going in. I was like, boom, I'm in. I'm interested in all that stuff. I'm interested in Poland. I'm interested in religion. I'm interested in people claiming to be the Messiah. Yeah, I'm up for it. And I really struggled. The best way I can think to communicate how I struggled, and I don't want to sit and read to you, because that kind of, if I just sit and read to you in a way, I'm like, oh God, is that really boring? But I have some notes that I made at the time, and it's not going to last long, I promise. And that's an indication of my level of engagement with this book. But I'd like to share them with you because they will give you an honest perspective on my perspective of this book at that time, not least because I wrote them never intending to share them with anybody. Late June to late September 2022, June, July, August, September. It's like 3 months took me to read this book. Read a lot of this in the old Paddington Cemetery, apparently, which is a graveyard in North London. Engaging plot at the start. Do remember that, felt it started off good. Priest going to rabbi's house. Interesting, religious conflict, perhaps. Loses me a lot after that. Can't really see a plot with stakes or rising tension, and a big one, so like a big one for me, Jacob, who's the main character, the Messiah, even if he's not always the protagonist, he's the main character, if you know what I mean, it's about him. Jacob doesn't feel real to me. I have the sense it's turning into a novel of ideas, certainly through the Book of Sand. So the book is the novel is divided into different books here, and I'm talking about one of the books. And that's not good. It's hard to write a rock star figure, which is my perception of what Jacob was kind of meant to be. I think you do it by writing that character through someone else's eyes. And often she being the author, does that, but it's not working for me. Go and check out my video on glimpse theory if you're interested in that idea. That's the idea if you have a particularly charismatic or mysterious character, they're most engaging to the reader when seen through somebody else's eyes. Dracula, Hannibal Lecter, Sherlock Holmes, that type of stuff. The suspense in the first 100 pages, I do remember it starting well for me. Characters that have clear wants. So this idea of the character needs to want something, otherwise it's hard to engage a reader. I'm engaged. First 100 pages. Fuck me, it dries out after that. I read an interview with a literary agent. She's asked, what's the biggest problem you see in submissions you're sent? She says, the writer loses sight of the reader. That's this book for me in a nutshell. This book is yet another example of how hard it is to write a charismatic main character. I found him boring. Jacob and all the rest, most of the time, they didn't seem at all real. Names on a page, that's all. Damn, that is a damning indictment. But as I say, I wasn't meaning it in a nuanced way. And there was this thing of sort of where do you disconnect the reader from what they're reading? I wasn't taking that into consideration at all. I'm interested to hear from other people about the books of Jakob and what they got from it. I've tried watching videos about it on YouTube, and even that I find quite like a daunting thing to do. So if you like this book, and my God, there are people who like this book whose opinions I vastly respect. If you got lots of things from this book, I am genuinely curious in understanding what they were, because I do not think Persuasion and the books of Jakob, I do not think it's the emperor is wearing no clothes. I don't think it's one of those scenarios. Naked Lunch, I am less sure, but also that author, there are tremendous challenges in terms of who they were as a person that may bleed over into my reading of that book. And also I may be influenced by the author's place in sort of like culture and things these days. They've fallen very far. So I'm interested in hearing from you if you have different perspectives to me on any of these books. And I'm interested in hearing from you if you have the same perspective as me as well. That might be quite nice, because I'm worried about putting this video out and getting tremendous amount of hate. So thank you very much, everybody. Do not let me spoil any of these books for you. If you got a lot from them, that is perfectly valid. Have a great day, night, evening, what have you, wherever you are. Thanks for watching. Cheers.